Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy Sunday. It is Seibo Shen here with the Happy Asian Males. And guess what? Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different today. We are going to be, instead of just smoking weed and hanging out and talking about whatever, I actually read some books. I read some books that will give you a little bit more insight into some of the things that's going on this planet. So if you guys are interested in listening along, let's discuss The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley. Let's go. All right, hey, what's going on, everybody? So, as I said, today we're going to do a slightly different format. I'm going to do a book review for you guys. So, something that we're going to walk through is The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley. Matt Ridley is a British scientist, journalist, and business person. If you guys have read any of his books, I would love to hear some of the comments or any opinions that you have on the book. But this book, The Rational Optimist, I think it was a very interesting book. I don't know if I'm 100% bought into all the concepts, but, I did like the book. And I think this book is good for anyone who, really fears that the world may be falling apart and, needs to have some information that is rational. Like we all know that there are many optimists out there. Sometimes you're just optimistic for the sake of being optimistic, but this is optimism rooted in rationality. So, okay, why don't we jump into the main themes of the book then? So, the main themes of the book that we have over here are theme number one: life in the past sucked and it's so much better now. So, I think for a lot of people right now, myself included, I think that there is a, what do you call it? Maybe there's a overly romanticization of how good it was to live in the past. We talk about the golden era or there were simpler times, but the book really talks about that there's a lot of data to suggest that it's way better to be living right now. So they said up until the time of the Industrial Revolution, the main causes of death were violence, famine, and plague. People really didn't die of old age. Before that time, there was also a 1 in 3 chance that you would just be murdered. So today, the life expectancy has doubled. The real, actual, usable income has increased by a factor of 10. And the vast majority of people right now, they live safe and healthy lives. You don't have to worry about being murdered. And that wasn't the case up until the 1800s. So that was a pretty interesting theme because I think that right now, if you read what's in the newspaper, and everything in the media, it does seem like the worst time. We have all of these conveniences, but it looks like, like Americans can't even agree with each other on how to handle the pandemic. People in the Middle East are still warring. There's all these different things that make it seem like, we are in like possibly the worst time in the world. But based on this book and what Matt Ridley is saying, it's actually the best time. So, okay, let's jump into theme number two. So theme number two is that because we discovered cooking, all these innovation networks came about because of the advent of cooking. And what is an innovation network and why cooking? Well, basically, cooking allowed us to basically more easily digest the cooked food. And once we started doing that, like the women would go collect the grains, the men would go hunt for protein. And once hunger was much more manageable and there was a surplus of food, people were able to trade their food with one another. And once they started trading and more trust began to grow, this led to many of the innovation networks all over the world. And people would barter all the different unique things that came from the area. And this is how the collective knowledge of humanity began to build. And societies that had less trading, they tended to show slower levels of advancement. So a really interesting example of this is the island of Tasmania. Being separated from the main island, they lost the ability to just make simple things like fish hooks and spears. And it's just interesting, that these areas that had less trade also seem to have less innovation as well. All right, so That is theme number 2. Let me get a little drink before we go into theme number 3. All right. So theme number 3 basically says by increasing trade, you thereby improve trust, and with trust, you could build more wealth. So, all right. So before trading with each other became popular, most of the interaction between humans were actually very violent. And as we began trading more and benefiting more from the trades, we began to build more trust with each other, begin to exchange and trade things in a uniquely human way, like animals do not trade with each other. And this expanded our ability to see that if we help someone else, it also benefits ourselves, which is a very human trait. So trades could be done and you could get something from someone else that you normally couldn't get from yourself. So this also really built up the overall community by involving more and more trade. And the more we began to trust each other, the more humanity actually began to flourish. And in the 1300s, France created this reciprocal credit system. So you could actually start buying goods and services, and then and this was actually based on your reputation. And if you broke the trust, then the credit was taken away from you. And it's kind of really amazing, like building this level of trust was only possible because you started cooking and then started trading and bartering, and ultimately it led to this credit system. And we've seen such a high positive correlation between areas that have a high level of trust and then those that accumulate wealth more quickly. So, for example, in the country of Peru, they said only 5% of the people trust random strangers, and they tend to be a more poor country. While in Norway, north of 65% of the people trust strangers, and they're considered a rather wealthy country. So that was pretty interesting as well. So uh, following that, the fourth major theme here is that famine and overpopulation are no longer the threats because of the rise, or are famine and overpopulation are no longer the deadly threats that they used to be because of the rise of trade and innovation. So before trading became very common, the size of our groups were limited to the amount of area that our local food supply could allow. As trading became more popular, farmers began improving their farming techniques so that they can grow food more efficiently and have more surplus to trade. The Greeks were especially good at this, by trading their food with some specialized tool makers. One of the tools that they got in return increased their ability to farm more efficiently, which also improved their ability to have more surplus of food so that they could trade for more stuff. So this is how, wealth and things really accumulate through the trade and through having so much knowledge being interchanged by these different people. So as a food surplus began to rise, there was also like a huge jump in population. And instead of famine, we had a brand new threat. And this new threat had to deal with overpopulation. And because this trading often led to more innovations as the population grew, we continued to get more efficient at producing food, where in the past a farmer required 1,000 hectares of land to sustain life. Now we only need 1/10 of a hectare to sustain a human life. So we've seen quite a huge improvement in the efficiency there. And I think the lesson learned here is that, we often fear about these things that will happen in the future, and we don't have the problem or the solution right now. But, with all this innovation, we could potentially solve the problem because historically that's what it's shown. So the fifth theme of the book is that as a population grew, this led to cities, and these larger cities led to more cross-fertilization of ideas. So I think this is a pretty cool one because, 7,000 years ago, we began seeing the first cities in Mesopotamia. This was a city where there was a lot of centralized trading. So a lot of people from all over came over to, trade their different wares from them. And this was the first time in history that you started seeing the professional tradesmen appear. So the professional tradesmen were people that, they didn't grow like a specific fruit. They didn't bring like meat from their farm. Their profession was just finding different things to trade, kind of like an importer and exporter. So because new professions began arising through increased trade, innovation began improving at a faster rate, and these cities would start making it easier for other people to travel to their trade area. So for example, the Phoenicians, they had a lot of people trading different types of materials, different types of wood, and they ended up making boats out of this very specific type of wood that would allow them to have bigger, faster traveling boats. And then they utilized these boats to shuttle people in and out of the Phoenician trading area. And by shuttling more merchants in and out of that area, they were also able to increase the innovation by having more people there. So, by utilizing all the trade, they were able to innovate bigger boats. By having these bigger boats, they were able to have more people come and trade in their area. And then this was just kind of like self-building on itself. So really interesting idea, and I think pretty cool. And it's very difficult to innovate in isolation. So as these areas were open to more trading, they tended to have more innovation. And this is where the collective knowledge really began to expand. So if you look at London in the 1800s, they had an explosion of inventions and ideas. And, it didn't really have to do anything with like the people of London being smarter. It was just that so many talented people were congregating in that area and trading ideas. And I think maybe a really good modern example of that would be what would it be? Would be like Silicon Valley, right? So everyone comes to California, wants to live the tech dream. You're like the smartest guy in your class, but when you come to Silicon Valley, you're just one of the average people there. But it's because you are just one of the average. Everyone is so smart and has all these crazy ideas, able to innovate at a much faster rate. So, anyways, let's jump into the next theme. So, the next theme number 6. The desire to capture and use energy as efficiently as possible is actually the true driving force behind human innovation and progress. So what do I mean by this? Well, we started off when we were reviewing this book about that cooking food leads to innovation because it led to the surplus of food. We'd be able to trade more, and not only that, but it made the ability for our body to absorb the nutrients much more efficient. So this led us to domesticating crops, utilizing the energy of the sun to grow our food so that we no longer had to be hunters and gatherers. That was a much better use of our energy as well. And from this greater boost of energy, we also got, the the discovery of fossil fuels. And by harnessing the power of fossil fuels, we were able to eliminate much of the physical labor that, quite frankly, used to be derived from, slaves and animals. And while we have also benefited from fossil fuels, it also factored into, harming our environment. Like a lot of the global warming obviously is due to the burning of all these fossil fuels. But we are continuing to innovate and create new technologies that make it more safer to consume efficient fuel. So, for example, early steam engines could convert only 1% of the heat generated, while today's turbines can convert up to 60%. So the idea here is that as we continue to progress and innovate, things like pollution will be solved by more innovation. So we'll see if that comes true. All right, so theme number 7 is poor countries will benefit from innovation without increase in carbon footprint. So the idea behind this one is that while climate change may be one of the most dire situations in our new future, we still have reasons to be optimistic. The world is both becoming richer and warmer, mainly due to poor countries participating in economic trading and burning more fossil fuels. And while they are using more fossil fuels, this increase in wealth and prosperity could also be used to better protect ourselves from natural disasters. So the example they give in the book is that in Yucatan, which is a highly protected area, a Category 5 storm went through Yucatan and there were no casualties. And in Burma, which is a less developed, more poor area, the same Category 5 hurricane went through and killed 200,000 people. So the idea here is that as we accumulate more wealth, we'll be able to build and strengthen our infrastructure so that we could fight and hopefully reverse global warming. All right, so theme number 7 is the collective knowledge of the world exploded with the internet. So with all this trade, in the past, people would give out information or knowledge and expect something back. Information and knowledge were key. Today with the internet, ideas, photos, videos, all types of different content are shared with no expectation of really getting anything back. So if you remember, areas that had an exchange of ideas typically had more innovation. That means that we are headed into a new world that would be rapidly changing due to the exchange of all of these ideas over the internet. And now we're able to learn, buy, sell, interact with people from all over the world, and this ability allows us to directly engage with people and enrich the lives of each other in ways that simply weren't possible before. And, as our collective knowledge is expanding so quickly right now, like basically the author is arguing that, these innovations will be able to solve a lot of these natural disasters and things that we're worried about. So the last theme and the conclusion of the book is, when ideas are shared, living standards rise, and the 21st century will just be a really awesome place to be. So historically speaking, if you believe Matt Ridley, life has never been better. There's no reason to think that it won't continue to get better through human innovation. New ideas spurn newer ideas, and we'll see more growth and innovation really raise the quality of living. We wouldn't have the one wheel if we didn't invent the skateboard first. The invention of the laser at first was considered a failure because although it was super cool, people couldn't really think of a practical application for it. And today, lasers are used in many applications like surgery, to play media, CD, DVD, Laserdisc, or even sending messages. And it's hard for us to imagine these new innovations because they aren't currently part of our paradigm. But so far, man has figured out a way to deal with every disaster thrown in front of us, and there's no reason we shouldn't expect to be able to deal with future disasters. And this is kind of interesting because as I was reading this, I didn't know like if I agreed 100% with what this author was saying, but in many ways I do, because when you look at mortality rates and life expectancy, like things like that have increased dramatically. And I know a lot of people will talk about, right now, well, look at the disparity in wealth. Well, shit, historically, there's always been a huge disparity in wealth. It's just always been that way. So if you look at history, we're just kind of repeating a lot of the patterns of history. But if you think about anxiety and depression, one of the main principles of the book was that once we were able to domesticate, figure out agriculture and figure out cooking, we were able to wipe out famine. So much of mankind prior to the last 200 or 300 years, we were just like trying to stay alive, so like when you're just trying to stay alive, you don't have that much time to be depressed or anxious because you don't have time to be self-actualized. Every day you're working to tend to the farm or go kill cows and go find some food for your family. Like you don't really have the time to self-actualize. So today, if you're anxious, if you're depressed, Matt Ridley, the author, argues that like that's a very, very privileged, position to be in, to even have those thoughts, because in the past, that just wasn't possible. So that's my book review of The Rational Optimist. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful. I had far less people tune in than when I just smoke weed, but shit, this was something that was important to me. I wanted to communicate and get some good information out there. If you guys enjoyed it, would love to hear any feedback about the book review. If you guys have read the book, would love to hear any of your comments and things like that. And yeah, maybe because it is the end of this, it is time for us to take some nice rips, right? Let's take a nice rip before we go. And if there's any of you that have any questions about The Rational Optimist, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. I'm curious how this broadcast came across. I'm using a brand new internet connection. We got some lights set up here. Yeah, I got a microphone, so hopefully it came in clear. Hopefully you guys learned something. And yeah, The Rational Optimist, it didn't take me too long to read. I really would pick up the book. If you are, here's the thing about like optimists. I used to be one of these optimistic guys for no reason. I just be like, oh shit, like bad stuff is happening. Let's just think of good stuff. But this author, like all his optimism is coming from data, is coming from the history of like the mankind, and looking at all the different things that we've solved through trade, through innovation, and ultimately looking at the numbers. Let's not look at the politics of what's going on in the world. Let's look at the numbers: mortality rates, life expectancy, how many people are living above the poverty line, how many people are starving. Like he said, this is the first time in history people are dying from obesity. More people are dying from obesity than famine and war. So like we have definitely been doing some really great things here. And like I said, a lot of this stuff about anxiety and depression, the author, his hypothesis or what his argument is that in the past, things were so bad that you were just worrying about like living the next day. You didn't even have any time to talk about like being depressed or being anxious or how to self-actualize. So, in many ways I do agree with that. So The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley, I would pick it up, get the audiobook Go find some cliff notes of it if you don't want to read the whole book, but definitely good stuff. For those that are very pessimistic or look at the world in a certain way and want to build some optimism, but don't want to build blind optimism. You want to do it in a way where you're actually being very rational, looking at the data points. Well, pick up the Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley, and really good read. So let's go ahead. Let's end the day with a nice rip. After this rip, I'm going to go downstairs and play Mario Kart with my daughters and just really, really enjoy. Here we go. Oh, yeah. So, let's see. Any parting comments for the day? I don't really have any parting comments. Hey, thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed the book reviews. I'm going to try to get through one book every 2 weeks or so and see if we could put out some pretty cool information. I usually don't have like that much time to read, so being at home and being able to crank out these reading sessions have been really, really cool. And I hope it benefits you. I think, man, like books are one of those things that I've gotten into the habit of really just digging, listening to audiobooks or reading or podcasts and things like that to learn. But when you read books, you really get into the concepts like a lot deeper. And the great thing about books is that it's taken these people like, I don't know how long, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years to accumulate all this information. And all it takes is like a week or two for you to read the book and, absorb all of that. I kind of think of it as like, when you think about like, I can't remember, there was like an X-Men that could absorb all the powers of the other people. She would just have to touch them. I think that was Rogue, but, I kind of feel like reading books is like a version of that, So here, let's go out with a nice rip. All right, cannabis and books, baby. Was I going to say anything else? I don't think so. That's it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Read books, love each other, give a virtual hug to a friend, leave some comments. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm Seibo. I'm out. I'm going to go play some Mario Kart with Sophie and Savannah. Maybe I can convince Yan to play with us, but she's preparing some sort of dinner for us. I hope the smoke alarm doesn't go off because I've just been smoking in this room. But oh shit, we got 11 people. Hey, we got 11 people watching. Someone drop me a quick comment. Someone ask me a question. Let's do some quick interaction between you guys, the interwebs, and me. I see a couple thumbs up. I see a couple hearts. Can I get a question? I just want to see someone write a question. Write a question. Let's do some interactivity. If not, I'm going to just jump off and play some video games. But yeah, that is something I love. I love interacting on this Facebook Live format because there is interactions on here where you can actually, engage with the people watching, not just, a one-way broadcast of saying, hey, here's a lot of great information that I'm going to give to you. You get some of that information back, or you get some feedback from the audience. That's something that has never been available. Like broadcasters in the past really couldn't do that until the internet. So that's another thing, that wasn't in the book, but that's just a little observation from myself. So okay, it looks like no one's gonna ask a comment. Maybe everyone's just too scared. Maybe people haven't read the book. Maybe people just don't really care. I don't know, but I appreciate you guys. I appreciate everyone watching. Maybe I'll just take one last rip here from this Hanu stone, and maybe someone will ask a question. Maybe not, but we'll see. We will see. Oh shit. So there are some comments here, but I can't see them. That's weird. That is weird. That is weird. Okay, my bad, my bad. You know what? This program I'm using is not letting the comments through. What's up with that? Anyways, thank you everyone for watching. I see the comments. I see the comments. Misty, you're my favorite. Drew, you're awesome too. Who else is out there? Ian, Kyle. Shoot, it's Mario Kart time. Did you find something new in the book for you? Oh, okay. Yes, yes, yes. So, you know, I I tend to be I tend to be someone that is much more in line with being optimistic anyways. But I did worry about being overly optimistic for no reason. So like reading this book, it definitely helped me validate that I didn't just have blind optimism, but it was based on looking at the data that was out there about the living conditions of our planet and where we are as a society. Obviously there's still a big misbalance between the haves and the have-nots, but shit, in the past, like he said, in the past, you were just fighting for survival every day. 1 in 3 people died by murder in the past. So that is not the case today. We have time to worry about our own self-actualization, which is a blessing. All right, Ian Dykstra adds, what turned you onto the vape industry? Oh man, this is a super dope question. So, in 1997, I was almost turning 21 in college. I was really trying to be like a pro athlete, but so I was like not partying. I wasn't doing any of that stuff. And finally, I think reality set in. So I decided like, hey, I want to live out the college experience, but I didn't want to like ruin my lungs by smoking cannabis. So I went, Googled, and found a way to vaporize cannabis. And um, basically, it was a heat gun that would attach to like some glass apparatuses and funnel the heat into the shredded herb area. And actually, it worked really, really good. I bet you today, if I found it, I would think it's probably one of the top 5 vaporizers to use. But it was really intimidating busting out a heat gun just to consume cannabis. So I had always believed in the technology. I just knew that it needed some fine tuning, And over the years, from 1997 to 2010, I probably accumulated over 100 different vaporizers. And my wife, as you can imagine, was not very happy about all the vaporizers. Hold on, real quick. Oh shit, Kyle knows about the Vapor Brothers, pencil sharpener, box vapes. Dude, you're OG. Okay, so anyways, I bought all these different vaporizers, always trying to convince people to change to vaporization, and no one would ever change to vaporization. They would just use the vaporizers at my house. So finally, I had been working in high tech. A bunch of the companies I worked for had successful exits, and then, I finally promised myself if the next company has a successful exit, I'm gonna go work on my own thing. We had a successful exit. I didn't know what it was. And my wife was just like, "Hey, you have so many friggin' vaporizers. It's obvious you must love vaporizers." So, I'm not an engineer, but I had bought a bunch of different vaporizers, and I had opened a bunch of them up as well. So I had some idea of how these things worked, and so I just kind of took a bunch of different notes. I went on a website. I said I was going to design my own vaporizer, and we had probably over 50 different engineers telling me about laminar flow, thermodynamics, electrical and mechanical engineering, and all these different things. And what I realized was, vaporization is part art and it's part science. Like there's a part where you got to get really into the data. And then the other part is like, well, everyone rips bongs, everyone rips vape pens differently. So how do you accommodate for all the different styles that people consume cannabis? So I just became like super obsessed because, I really love taking care of my health, but I also really love cannabis. And despite people saying like smoking joints isn't that bad for you, or like it's not that bad for your lungs, like I could feel it in my body, like I listen to my body. So like when my body, like my lungs are restricted after like smoking a blunt or something, like I mean, I know it's not as bad as cigarettes, and like it kind of like self cleans. And a lot of people say that, but for me, when I felt it on my body, I was just like, I'm not performing as good. And we all know in jiu-jitsu, like you don't want Like if you have a bad gas tank in jiu-jitsu, it's just tough to like hang with people because even if you have better technique and you just can't move, you're just not, well, if you can't move and don't have the energy to keep up with them, you're just gonna lose, right? So yeah, that's why I got into the vaporizer industry. And yeah, like it really satisfies like my creative side. It satisfies my competitive side, so I could be an entrepreneur. And it's pretty cool, like I get to tell my kids to really go after their dreams. And I mean, uh, like my dad always told me to go for his dreams. And I always asked my dad, like, hey, did you want to be like a owner of like a accounting firm? Or like that's what he did in the past. And he was like, no. And so like I always thought it was kind of weird, like my dad would tell me one thing but did something else. So for me, it was very important to kind of be the example for my kids. Anyways, oh, Tom Quigley is in the house. Chris Carr is in the house. Who else is in the house? Well, if anyone has any questions, go ahead and type them. If not, it's going to be Mario Kart time. You know what? And I'm just looking at a video of myself talking into the camera. Talking into the camera is friggin' weird. I like this other style where I'm just looking off to the side, kind of like, uh, 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 just zoning out. All right, last question. Drew Robertson. How can I take my Vape XL fishing with me? Very simple. You could take your Vape XL fishing with you by getting one of those batteries. I got a what kind is it called? I believe it's called a Yeti 450, and it's a battery that could be solar charged as well. So I often have one in my car. I have one in my car, and the oh, sorry, I'm reading Tom Quigley thing, but I have one in the car, so if I ever have to like take a dab before I go to a restaurant, I could plug my Vape XL Evo in there. Tom Quigley. Oh, I think the background he's talking about is. Hold on, real quick. I don't have that background on right now, but let me get that. I have it. I do have a green screen here, so here I'll show you how I did it. So we got this back here, and then we do this. We do this. Yeah. Hey, man, I hope you had a good workout, Tom. Ian, I'm glad you enjoyed the answer. Happy Sunday, everyone. You guys have a wonderful day. And yes, this background, I think this is really the crowning jewel of my artistic talents, is this thing, it's this background. So, yeah, feel like a kid, every time I see this thing. It makes me laugh. All right, guys. I am going to go dominate my kids in Mario Kart. I am out. Go read a book. I highly recommend it. You know what? I'm going to be honest. My mind got really tired. My eyes got really tired. It was tough to keep up, but powered through it, and it was awesome. Took some notes. I remember it in my head, and now I'm not just a blind optimist, but Seibo Shen is a rational optimist. So I am out, guys.